Okay, good afternoon, and thanks to everybody who made it here this afternoon. Just to make sure you're in the right place online, this is the Facing the Future Real World Math webinar. A few things before we get started. You may hear traffic noises or sirens in the background, and I apologize for that. We're one block from a fire station on the 4th floor of an older building, so you may hear some traffic noise down there. For those of you who are wondering, slides will be emailed to you at the end of the session along with a link to a recording of the webinar. So if you want to follow up with that, you can share this with other people or go back and listen to it later on. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us here today. My name is Dave Wilton, and I am the Assistant Outreach Director here at Facing the Future. I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a brief minute. If you want to get in touch with me, those are the best ways to contact me, phone number and website there. During the course of the presentation, just a few housekeeping measures. If you have questions, there's a box on your screen on the right-hand side, which you may need to unlock or expand, so to speak. And you can type your questions or comments in the chat box there. We may respond to those to the whole group if we get any questions. And before I dive in, I do have one set of questions I'd like to ask you. And we will get those going right here. So take a look at that, and what I'd like you to do with that is just think to yourself in your own head, how would you answer those questions, or how would you want your students to answer that question? And the reason for asking this is it's a way to kind of get thinking about why this book was created and give you a chance to think about how you might ask that question with your own students. And what I'd like you to do is just, in your own head, think of 3 words that you would use to answer that question. And if you'd like to share your thoughts in the chat box, feel free, but you're welcome to keep your thoughts to yourself as well. So that's one way of framing this question, and the other one I want to show you is this, which is, in 50 years, I want the world to be. And changing the question, I think, just a little bit gives you a different perspective on maybe how you might answer this question. The idea behind this question was in part inspired by Thomas Friedman's book, Hot, Flat, and Crowded. So you may have answered the first question in those kind of veins, thinking the world in 50 years is going to be hot, flat, and crowded. But if you change it to how you want the world to be, you might have a different way of answering that question. So this, I tend to think, is an engaging way of kind of introducing the broader subject of the use of global issues in content areas. And everyone has an opinion. We all care about the future, and we're all going to be affected by it. So I think it's an engaging way for us as teachers and with our students to kind of get the ball rolling and thinking about this. And this is why I hope you'll find that real-world math can enable you with your students to engage them where they're at, using issues that are of interest and of relevance to them. So a little bit about Facing the Future. Some of you may have heard of us before. You may have already been on our email newsletter, so you're familiar with our organization. We're a Seattle-based nonprofit. We were founded in 1995, excuse me, and our mission really is to educate and motivate today's students so that they can be responsible stewards of tomorrow's world. And our goal is to equip educators, schools, and districts so that you can help your students develop critical thinking skills to address global issues and really working on those positive solutions and positive outcomes that that previous question asked of what do you want the world to be like in 50 years. So when you're a full-grown adult, what do you think the world's going to be, and what do you want it to be like, and what can you do to get it there? So what do we do as an organization? Our goal is to get resources to educators like yourselves so that you can reach your students and teach your students how to think critically about complex global issues. And we do this by offering a whole realm of supplemental curriculum in multiple ways that can be used by educators in classrooms around the country and around the world as well. Our resources deal with connections between issues such as poverty or population, conflict, climate change, the environment, and allow you to meet your students where they're at and pick an issue that is either already on your agenda or one that is of interest to your students to kind of capture their interest. Our curriculum is interdisciplinary. It's used in science, environmental science, social studies, math, language arts classes by teachers all around the U.S. in all 50 states and nowadays in over 100 countries around the world. One of the things I'll be showing you is how you can access our free resources because there are some associated with this product itself, Real World Math, and also lots of others for different subjects and different issues as well. Likewise, Facing the Future, we have a professional development staff that is available to come to your school or district to do workshops on particular subjects or on particular issues. And if you're interested in learning more about that, on our homepage, which is a screenshot there, you can click on the professional development link at the bottom left there and learn more about that. And that is our web address. It's just facingthefuture.org. So if you want to learn more about us, feel free to visit there at any time. So one of the things that we like to do with our materials is to frame it in the idea that all these global issues are interconnected. And as you can see there, we have our Global Issues Mobile, which if you like that graphic, you can actually download that from our website as well. But the idea behind this is that we think this mobile really does a nice job of illustrating how these larger global issues that we hear about in the news every day are interconnected. And so we think the question might be, well, why use global issues in math? And it's because they're timely, they're engaging, and they allow for your students to be involved in meaningful and purposeful development of mathematical and thinking skills using real-world issues, using real math issues as a context. So that's why we like to use this mobile. As you can see, there's a lot of things happening, hanging in the balance there. And as you know with mobiles, if one thing changes the balance, it can kind of ripple throughout the system and affect those other issues there. So this can often be seen as kind of a negative feedback cycle with problems of one issue bumping into another. So for example, if there's a conflict in one area of the world, it might cause people to move to other locations. So we've got migration, which might place stresses on resources like water or food. And so you get this kind of out of whack global issues mobile. This can also, though, be seen as an opportunity for positive results, because if we can find ways to help people and communities and their governments, for example, reduce conflict, the migration and resource issues might be reduced as well. And that, I think, kind of gets at that second question again of what do you want the world to be like? And some people might have a view of a world with less conflict, and ways to do that might be to reduce stresses on natural resources is another way of doing that. So another way to use this with your students, again, is to ask them where they might think a particular global issue that isn't up there might hang on this, like education, for example, or climate change. Where would you hang that if you were going to be putting this on this global issues mobile? So again, that graphic you can download from our website, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I want to move on now and talk about how we think global issues, and in math in particular, can help your students develop what we call global competence. And the idea behind global competence is that students need a certain set of skills to be able to really effectively participate in a 21st century economy, a 21st century society. And borrowing from a gentleman, Anthony Jackson, at the Asia Society, he's laid out 5 different things that he feels students need to be able to do. So you can see those up there, anything from investigating the world to taking action, so the whole realm, and being able to apply a whole host of different skills to that. So that sounds great, and it's meaningful, I think. To communicate that to our students, though, I think often it gets lost in translation. And so what I've tried to do here is meet us where our students are at, with the idea being that those are the skills on the left that we want them to have, but this is often really where students are at in their lives. So they're curious about things, they want to share about them, they want to be involved, and they have skills that they want to bring to bear. And so I think using something like real-world math to get them engaged in it is a way of harnessing that energy of your students and allowing them to be involved in using real mathematical skills, but also developing their competence and maybe doing 2 things at once and not actually realizing it. So, when will I ever use this? Question that teachers often hear. And we created this resource in essence to kind of try and answer that question and to allow you to have your students have that question answered for them. So the lessons in this book enable you and your students to examine real data, real information, real numbers. We got them from places like the U.S. Census, the Population Reference Bureau, so it's actual information that's out there. And to use them in a meaningful mathematical context. So you and your students can explore the numbers behind some of the biggest challenges and understand the information behind today's headlines. Now, I know as math teachers, which many of you looks like you are, you might be saying, I'm not a social studies teacher. I don't have time for my students to be debating poverty in my classroom. And you don't have to, but our hope and belief at Facing the Future is that you will find your students become more engaged with the math when they have a meaningful context behind it. Just as an example of why I think this is important, one of the realizations that researchers have kind of been coming to recently out of the emerging understanding and debate about climate change is that they've done really a poor job of communicating their findings of climate science to the U.S. public and the world public in general. And I think by supporting students in examining numbers in real-world contexts, they're able to see the role math plays in understanding the story that numbers tell. So furthermore, by providing these opportunities for your students to engage in debate around these issues and explore them, explore the data associated with them, it gives them a chance to become more conversant in the language of mathematics and also to increase their collaboration and thinking skills around those topics as well. So real-world math is a collection of a teacher's guide and a student workbook. We'll be going through a couple lessons from the teacher's guide, sharing with you an example of how a teacher has used this in her classroom, and talking about the standards alignment as well, and giving you an example to look at those. So with those 15 different lessons, the investigations are built around having students use their mathematics knowledge in the context of really 21st century skills of critical thinking and collaboration, working with their peers in developing their global perspective in a mathematics context. These skills combined together really help them get prepared for the future and engage them in problem-solving activities similar to what ones they'll be asked to deal with on a daily basis, professionally and personally as citizens in this country. Now, the way that this book can be used, we wanted to make this as kind of multi-purpose as possible. So the idea behind it is that you don't have to do it in one particular way. You may decide that you're teaching a particular issue or a particular subject, and you want to have your students get really involved right away at the beginning, so you can use it as a hook activity to start things off. It may be that you've already covered a particular mathematical skill, and you'd like to kind of go back and reinforce things, so it's an opportunity to do that in a new and different way. It could be that you want to use this as kind of an assessment at the end of a unit to get a real-world context to have your students use the skills they've developed. And it may also be that you want to have opportunities for students maybe who are working ahead of the class, or maybe need a differentiated instruction approach to look at things in a different way. So you can use it individually, in a small group, or with your whole class. One of the things that we've just recently come out with in response to teacher requests is the ability to have all of our lessons in a searchable database for state education standards. So what you see there is just a snapshot of what our standards tool looks like, and I want to take you to our website and just show you how to navigate this so you can go back and use it with either the real-world math lessons or something else from our website that you find to be useful. So I'm going to click on that link, and it's going to open up in the browser if I've done my technology correctly. So this is our website itself, and there are lots of different ways you can navigate to the standards page, and I'll show you those as we move along. So I'm going to try to give you some visual, try not to get you seasick here by clicking on things too quickly, but you can see on the page itself, I'm going to click on the All Resources link because we know we're using the math book. I'm going to scroll down to Real World Math and then click Search. And this is going to pull up all the lessons in Real World Math, and we're going to look at Lesson 1. So I'm going to say, okay, let's look at the standards for Lesson 1. And let's say, I know there are a couple of folks from California who signed up for this, so let's click on California standards and see what lessons there are that align with it and what standards there are. So you can see we've got California grade 6 math standards, grade 6 science standards as well, and I'm going to do my best to scroll down here slowly so you can see we've got grade 7 and also grade 8 as well, so math and science alignments. And that's available for every state, and also we have aligned them to the Common Core, or excuse me, the 21st Century Skills Standards as well. So you could also look at that in the same way, but maybe you know what particular states you're in. You want to look for things with a certain grade level, for example. So I could choose, which state I'm in, which grade I'm in, and then which subject I'm teaching, because it could be that you're using something outside of a math context, and it'll give you the standards alignments for that as well that way. So several different ways to access our standards, and we hope that you'll find this to be a useful tool when you're doing your lesson and unit planning. The other thing that we were striving to do was to recognize the fact that this is going to be used in several different contexts, and often it's going to be used as a supplement with other materials. So we took a look at what are the more commonly used, more popular math textbooks in the U.S., and created an alignment table so you can see if you're using one of those books up there. So maybe you're using the Prentice Hall pre-algebra book, or you're using Connected Mathematics, or Passport to Algebra. Any one of those books, if you're using those already as your primary classroom textbook, you can then take a look at that chart and see which lessons align with which chapters or which units in those particular textbooks there. So, excuse me, that is in the beginning of the teacher's guide, so that table is there, and you can also access that online and download it as a free website download. So let's move along, and I want to give you a chance to really kind of look at the lessons and the units themselves. So there are 15 different lessons that I spoke about, and that's the title of them, each one of those there. We're going to look at lesson number 1, but I want to give you a chance to also look at all 15 of them there. So what you're seeing are essentially the mathematical skill that's covered and the global issue that it's done in the context of. So lesson 1, for example, that we're going to look at is introducing number patterns using waste and recycling as the context. And you can approach this as a couple of different things. You can say, I want to reinforce a particular mathematical skill, so you may search for the skill, and maybe it's it's integers, or maybe you're working on surface area and volume, so you might move over to chapter 12. Or maybe there's a particular issue or idea that's important to you, or that's already in your curriculum, and you want to work more with your students on this in a mathematical context. So maybe you've been looking at resource distribution or food in your classroom, and food is becoming a popular issue. Maybe you have a school garden. So you might look at chapter 4, which is using food in the skill set of solving algebraic equations. So 2 different ways that you can approach this, and I think this makes it really useful and versatile for kind of reinforcing those math skills again, like we talked about. So that quote there from Lily Tomlin, I think is just a nice snapshot of what this first lesson is about. We've all gone to the store, we buy something, we get this plastic bag, and then we put the bag back in the trash. The beginning of each chapter in the teacher's guide starts out with a set of critical thinking questions and some objectives. So you can see there in chapter 1, students are exploring number patterns that are related to the disposal and recycling of plastic bottles. And they look at long-term trends in waste production, and per person they graph them. Students break them down in percentages of various materials that compose our waste stream. So we're asking them to think about this in this context. So these are the questions, kind of the overarching questions for this first chapter. Moving along, the objectives for the first chapter, which you're going to see here in a minute, are kind of two parts that we want them to be involved in looking at. The first one there is developing that mathematical skill. The second one, though, is, as you can see, is more content-based. So, as you can see, we're mixing math skills and objectives with content area objectives. So, kind of doing 2 things at once with this unit. So that's what Chapter 1 is asking students to do. As an introductory activity, I'm going to show you in a minute here a slide with some pictures of various everyday items that you probably use at school and certainly at home. And what I'd like you to bear in mind are those 2 questions there. So where does it go after it's used, and can it be reused? And this is the introductory activity from Chapter 1. And so your students will be asked this question, and you can bring in some of these items to have actual tactile representations of what they are. So I'm going to show you this slide in a minute, and I want you to bear in mind those questions of where does it come from, or where does it go after it's used, and can it be reused, and if so, how? So in a minute here up on your screen, you're going to see a snapshot of 8 different items there. So we've got anything from shoes to an aluminum can to a phone book to glass bottles to batteries to a plastic bottle. And take a look at those and just think about, in your own community or in your own school, how would those be used, and where would they go after they're done being used? And then moving along with those questions, so maybe you already know what the answers to those are, taking a look at those. And then let's think about these questions. So these, again, are questions from the group. So is it okay for all these items to be landfilled? And I have a poll question I'd like to ask you here. So on your screen in a minute, you're going to see a question come up. And imagine at your school, where does a plastic bottle go after it's been used? And so, does it go to a landfill? Does it go to an incinerator in your community? Does it go to a recycling center? Or I don't know where it goes, or maybe your school doesn't allow plastic bottles. So take a minute to answer those questions and pick your answer. And once everybody's finished voting, I'll close the poll, and let's just take a look at what everybody says. It's like almost everybody's voted. If anybody else wants to vote, do it now or the polls will be closing. Okay, it looks like everyone's voted that's going to vote. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here and share the results with you. And so it looks like the large majority of you, 83% of you, it goes to a recycling center, which is encouraging to know. And 70% don't know where it goes. And so that's, you know, not a bad thing really. It's a great thing for you and your students to figure out where does this plastic bottle go. So we've thought about where the plastic bottle might go at your school. Next thing I'd like to do is actually ask you another poll question here, and I'll get that up. Is to think about for yourself, how many plastic bottles do you use in a day? And that's one of the questions that students are asked in the introductory lesson here. So think about how many bottles you use in a day. You may be that you don't use any, or it could be you use several of them, and it's not to be a judgment. It's mostly just to think about we need to drink things, we need beverages, they come in plastic bottles often, and how do we use them? So some folks are voting there. A couple more people need to vote. All right. So I'm going to close that one out and share it with everybody. And it's coming up here in a minute. So it looks like overwhelming majority of you, 80% of you, don't use plastic bottles at all, which is great to hear. I think that speaks to maybe who we are that decide to log into this webinar. But also, if we were to expand this to the broader context of our school or our particular classroom, think about what that answer might be, or in your community at large. We certainly know plastic bottles are used to a large degree. So if you've used a plastic bottle in your day, or if you know somebody who has, let's go a little bit further there and think about how many plastic bottles do you think are used in 5 minutes in the U.S. And I'm going to throw up one more poll question there. And you've got some choices anywhere from 700,000 or 0.7 million up to 3.6 million. So take your best educated guess, or maybe you already know the answer, as to how many plastic bottles you think are used in the U.S. every day in 5 minutes. So a very small period of time, just 5 minutes, but there's over 300 million of us in the U.S. All right, let's go ahead and close that out and show everybody the answers. So the survey says we've got a couple different ideas of how many this might be. So the majority of folks think 3.6 million plastic bottles are used in 5 minutes in the U.S. every day. A few people think it's 1.2 million. A few think that it's 2 million. So let's go and hide this. And you can see down there at the bottom of the screen when it changes over, the correct answer is 2 million bottles are used in 5 minutes in the U.S. So that's a lot. It's a big number, actually kind of hard to imagine in your head, but in a minute I'm going to show you a really interesting art project that an artist did that is a nice way to kind of encapsulate that idea, that gives you a better sense of what 5 million bottles looks like. So moving along, students have been asked this question, and then there is a set of worksheets that are included in the student workbook, and they're also echoed in the teacher's guide, that start off with asking students to think about, well, if we know this piece of information, that 2 million bottles are used in 5 minutes, how can we extrapolate that out to get a better sense of things? So they're given this table and asked to fill it in all the way up to 60 minutes, and then they're asked a set of questions about the information that they've come up with. So if we know 2 million used in 5 minutes, how many plastic bottles are used in a day? And I won't ask you to do the math here, but you can get an idea of what that looks like. So 576 million plastic bottles in the U.S. in one day. That's a lot. That's more than, it's almost 2 bottles per person if there's 3 million people in the U.S. The next question asks them to think, well, okay, if a third of those are recycled, how many are not? There's a couple different ways you can arrive at that number. But again, that's 384 million bottles that are going somewhere other than a recycling center. And if that's not the recycling center they're going to. Where are they probably going? Probably going to a landfill, or not even making it that far and ending up on your street. A broader question that's part of this is think about 2 consequences of not recycling plastic bottles, and there's certainly no right answer to that one. And then the last question students are asked to think about is, let's create an equation to figure out how many bottles there are in a set period of time, and that's what that equation looks like. So that's the first step in their exploration of waste and recycling using plastic bottles. The next part kind of expands it to say, well, let's look at trash in the U.S. per person per day. So it starts off with the amount of pounds of trash generated per person per day over time, and students are asked to then generate this or organize this into a line graph. So that's what that would end up looking like. But then they're also asked to extrapolate and think about, in 2020, what do you think it might be? And there's a couple different answers you might arrive at, depending upon how you want to do your line of best fit, so to speak. So it could be anywhere from 5.5 to 4.6 pounds per person, and there might be different reasons you have for thinking of why it might be a certain way. And then lastly, the students are asked to think about questions such as this. So if all these materials except plastics and food scraps make up 76%, what percentage of our waste stream is just plastic? So there's a way to come up with that answer, and then to kind of expand your thinking about how big is this really if it goes to a landfill. If we know that this much takes up 1 cubic yard, how many bottles would be saved, or how much space would be saved if we recycled them? So that's a fair amount. So again, a couple different ways for students to be thinking about this and thinking about it in the context of their own community. At the end of this activity, there's a set of questions that students are asked, and you can see those right there. So getting at the ways of, what do we do with this if we know what this is the issue? And it could be in your community that you have opportunities for it to go to a recycling center, but other places do not. That last one there, what kinds of materials are recyclable in your community, what barriers are there to recycling and ways to overcome them, is kind of the crux of the next part of what you can do with this activity. That's one of the things that we strive to do, is give you opportunities to kind of expand your students' reach into your community, and they're thinking about this issue in their community and what they can do to take action on it. Moving on, the next part, every chapter has an associate student reading, and we wanted to do this again to give you the opportunity to kind of do this learning in context. And these are readings that are small enough. It's 1 page per chapter, so there's 15 one-page readings. The idea behind them, again, is to connect global issues to impacts either globally or locally, and then have students read about possible student actions they could take. So you can see there, there's kind of an introduction. The next header there is where it all goes, and the last part is titled Don't Waste a Good Thing. So it gives you some ideas about what you can do to reduce and reuse instead of throwing things away. And every one of these readings is referenced, so if you have questions or if your students have questions, they can turn to these resources and look at the facts behind the figures, so to speak. After the student resources, there are links to different websites that you can go to in the Teacher's Guide, and this is one of them. This is an artist, Chris Jordan, who did a series of art piece installations that he called Running the Numbers, and I want to take you to his website. What you see there is his depiction of 2 million plastic bottles. You can kind of get a blow-up picture on the right-hand side there. But going to his website, he's done a really great thing where you can look at this picture and then actually zoom in on it. So that's the same picture that we just saw. I'm going to click on it when it comes up here and give you a chance to see what it looks like. So there's those 2 million plastic bottles. That's 5 minutes of use in the U.S. And if we click on it, it allows you to kind of zoom in and get a sense of the scale. What 2 million looks like, and then to realize, as students did with the math exercises, that 2 million is only just 5 minutes. So it's a lot of bottles in a short amount of time. And again, you can zoom back. And on the right side, it's a whole series of pictures that he's done. So he's everything from looking at light bulbs and energy use to the number of people in U.S. prisons in a certain period of time in the U.S. So it's a really interesting take on statistics, and allows us to kind of get a sense of the scale behind these numbers. So that's it's chrisjordan.com is the website. And we're going to go back to our slideshow here. And coming up on your screen next, you are going to see a picture of an iceberg. And while that's loading up, as we all know with icebergs, most of what you see is below the water line. And that's really what we're striving to do with all of these lessons, to have students get their thinking kind of beyond that water line, beyond that horizon. So with the plastic bottles, for example, the idea behind this is, maybe I use a plastic bottle every day, and if I stop and think about it, I'm using a plastic bottle every day, and so that's kind of my pattern. So I'm getting below the water line, but then to really think about it, well, why is it that I'm using a plastic bottle every day? Is it because that's the only way I can get this certain beverage, or are there other ways I could get this packaged, or is there another way I could transport it in a different kind of bottle, or maybe I don't have any choices in my community and plastic bottles are the predominant way that I can get my beverages. So there's lots of different ways that students can approach this. But again, that's the idea behind it, is that events are things that we see or hear about in the world. So it's an event like climate change, or it's a conflict somewhere in the world, or it's an epidemic, or an oil spill, you name it. That's an event. But looking at those things, beneath that there's patterns. So they're things that happen over and over again, which we don't usually often think about or hear about. So for example, things like poverty, things like that might be brought on by a different issue that's cropping up. If you look back in time, there was the genocide in Rwanda, for example, as an issue, as a pattern that was brought on by lots of different issues coming together. And deep beneath that, we look at these structures and what these behaviors are and where they come from. So there might be economic, political, or social structures or mindsets, essentially, that kind of subconsciously guide the decisions that we make. So these structures are ways that we create things in our society, and there's certain patterns that then lead to certain events, and why is it that these structures are driving these events. So in the case of plastic bottles, again, we're asking students to explore that underlying structure and to look at it in their own community and how it's playing out. Now, if you thought that the exploration of the plastic bottles and recycling and reuse in your community was interesting, I want to share with you just another free resource that might be of interest to you. We just recently came out with this. It's called Bayou's Toss. It's a 2-week curriculum unit that explores the materials economy, so that process of extraction, production, distribution, and consumption, and ultimately, again, disposal, like with the plastic bottle. So you could use, again, the plastic bottle in this context and use the lessons in this unit that you can download from our website, or you might choose to use something else, some other product, to have students go through and really examine in depth how does something get from the raw material stage to their front door, and then where does it go out the back door, so to speak. Again, it's 10 different lessons that students can be involved in. It's an interdisciplinary unit again, so it looks at everything from, what is garbage and where does it come from, to where do things come from when they're manufactured, the cost of production, how did they get them to us, and then really thinking about, if we know this is the current system, how could we redesign this system to make it more optimal, to really account for more opportunities to reduce and reuse things. So that's Bayou's Toss. Again, you can download that from our website for free, and we'll be talking about that in just a minute. I want to move along, though, and talk about one teacher's use of real-world math in her classroom, and that's using lesson number 11. So looking more at the geometry of things instead of the number parts of things. And lesson 11 deals with area and transformation, and uses wildlife habitats and the larger idea of endangered species as the context for this. So we're asking students in this one to think about what are ways to conserve and protect endangered species, and what does environmental protection have to do with our own lives and livelihoods. And again, those kind of interdisciplinary objectives there are asking students to be involved in finding the area of different polygons, but also to think about how habitat size and location can affect different species, and talk about what does it mean to ensure that a species can survive, and how is that important for humans as well. So it uses snow leopards as the kind of banner species for this lesson, and they are looked at in the context of their habitat, which is primarily in Central Asia. The lesson starts off with students being asked to write one unique thing that you can do, and if you were to think of this for yourself, what would you write down? So it's something that you're proud of, not something that not many other people can do. And if you think about that for a minute, you're going to come up with something, and it could be something silly that I can ride a unicycle backwards, or it could be something really useful that I'm able to I used to be an EMT or something like that, and so I know how to do CPR on people that not everybody else does. But then to take this question, then reframe it, and think about what would the world be like if no one else had that particular skill. And the reason for asking that question is, just like with a particular skill, if we didn't have people able to do CPR, that would not be a good situation for the health of our community. and to think about, well, what happens if a particular plant or animal that brings a certain set of skills to a habitat, to an ecosystem, what if that plant or animal disappears? And often realizing that if one species is affected, or if one species goes extinct, many are affected by it. So this introduces the concept of endangered species and uses, again, snow leopards as the species in particular that this is the example used in. What you see coming up next is a picture of one of the worksheets from this lesson 11. So students are asked to think about the area of different animal habitats in the wild and in a zoo, and think about how size and location might affect a particular species. And so snow leopards in this particular example. So a teacher in Florida, Amy Spees, used this lesson with her students to quite a surprising and engaging effect. With her students, they created a native habitat garden in their school. So it went really much beyond the classroom and the worksheets here, and I want to just briefly explain to you what she did. So Amy taught at a school called Community Learning Center East, which was grades 7 through 10. So it's for students who may not have been successful in the traditional classroom settings. They came to this school, and Amy was able to provide them with a really engaging context for developing their mathematical skills. So what she ended up doing was doing this lesson with the students, and then they really kind of took it and ran with it. So Amy kind of gave us a rundown of how she did this, and one of the things that she wrote was that the lessons reinforced the mathematical skills of area and transformation, and the students were asked to calculate the perimeter for the border of the planting area and found the area, had to find the area for things like weed cloth, calculate the volume of the mulch they would need. The lesson, as she also mentioned, kind of unexpectedly brought up metric conversions, since they needed to know how to convert kilometers into meters. They also ended up bringing in geography, because students were wondering, well, where do snow leopards live? And so they started looking at Mongolia and Pakistan and Afghanistan, their habitat. There are some other kind of fun teachable moments. Students working on the worksheet were wondering, well, where is the Bronx Zoo? Because that's one of the habitats mentioned is the Bronx Zoo for snow leopards. One student thought it was in Mexico, but so it gives you a chance to kind of interconnect while you're doing math with this geographic as well. And also, because of what's in the news these days, she was able to connect snow leopard habitat to what's happening in Pakistan and Afghanistan, because that is snow leopard habitat and also a lot of conflict happening in that area of the world. So she was also able to allow her students to really not only show sufficiency or their proficiency in mathematical calculations, but also the project became a catalyst for this large-scale all-school habitat project, which math skills were reinforced. So rather than using just prescribed practice items, it provided real-world skills. And as she said, it wasn't just an add-on, but it was a replacement of less effective materials. So you see there students working on kind of the end result of what they came up with this habitat guard. So there are native plants there, they're drought-resistant for their area in Florida. And the students, they had to work collaboratively to ensure that they had the correct mathematical calculations. They had to brainstorm ideas for this project. It also incorporated communication skills because they were working together. The language arts teacher at her school also got involved in the project, and students did research and writing, including persuasive papers about why it's important to have native plants. So it also generated some publicity for her school. The local paper came. Kids really started to take ownership of this and felt some pride in their work. And as a result, the project kind of grew because of that. And it allowed them to, kind of showcase their school. They were doing tours. They created slideshows about this and got some publicity for their school. And they also worked with all these native community groups there. So the owner of a native plant nursery in the area got involved. They worked with organizations like the National Wildlife Stewards and the Florida Native Plant Society to really get students thinking about, this is what our community is about. This is what can happen in our community if we get involved with these different organizations. So that's just, I think, one kind of inspiring example of how you can use this with your students and really get them engaged, and ultimately often have the chance for them to kind of go with it because this spurred them on in their own skills and interests. Coming up next, I just want to show you a snapshot of our website and demonstrate for you how you can actually get to the free resources from Facing the Future. So clicking on this is going to take us to the home page, and I want to show you how to navigate there. So that's, if you clicked on the curriculum link on the home page, you would then be taken to this page where you can download these free resources. And if I click on, let's say we know we want to work in math, so I'm going to click on Downloads by Subject over on the left-hand side there, and that's going to take me to the subject page. And I'm going to scroll down, and I want to look at math curriculum, so I'm going to oops, sorry about that, folks. Going to click on the math curriculum page, and that comes up here. There we go. So what you're seeing there is not the math part. That's our literacy curriculum, Making Connections, which is a different language arts and literacy curriculum you can use using global issues. But we're going to look at math. So up here in the green bar, I'm going to click on math curriculum, and that takes me to real world math. And as you can see, if I scroll down, there's a whole set of lessons you can download there. So there are you can download the table of contents and the introduction, which will give you that alignment key for the different popular U.S. math textbooks. Then you can also have opportunities to download the worksheets from the student lesson book, or worksheets from the student workbook, and the teacher's guide, the lesson plans as well. So just by example, let's look at, we'll click on the first one here for Chapter 7, and I'm going to download the lesson plan from the teacher's guide. It'll take you to a page. You just need to enter your email address. So I'm Dave at facingthefuture.org. I type that in and hit continue, and that's going to bring it to download. Depending on how fast your connection is, it may come up relatively quickly, or it may take a few minutes for it to download. It's going to download a PDF, so you want to make sure you know where downloads go on your computer. Mine go to my desktop, some go to a download folder. Once you've got that, you can then open it up, and you've got your lesson plan right there. The other thing that we have that you can use with this curriculum is we have a set of what we call data sets, and we've created them for select lessons, and there are also a couple that you can use with the Texas Instruments Inspire calculators, and I'll show you what those look like in a minute here. If I go back to the Real World Math book itself, I'm going to click on that, on the Real World Math book picture, and that's going to take me to the page for Real World Math itself. And you'll see there on the bottom on the green bar, if I scroll over, there is a little tab there called Data Sets, and I'm going to click on that, and that'll come up, and I can then scroll down. And for example, we were working on lesson number 1. There's a data set there for that, so I'm going to download the data set there. And what this will bring up is a nice quick little Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to open that up and give you a chance to look at that. And it's going to open that up. So you can see there, this is that table that we were looking at earlier. And so, for example, let's say students were asked to then graph what happens in 2020. I might write that down, and I think, okay, it's going to be 5.5 pounds of waste per person. I can then, with my students, work through, and let's create a line graph for this. So I'm going to highlight that area and go to Insert in Excel and click on Line Graph and pull that up. And you'll see a few quick moments coming up here. It's generated a nice little line graph of our data. So it's, again, another way to involve your students in working on this. They may choose to have extra data depending upon how far you want to project this. But again, a different way of engaging your students using a different piece of technology with these math lessons. So, getting back to what we were talking about before, again, that's our home page. All you need to do when this comes up, I'll show you again, is just click on the free curriculum link right there where my finger is pointing, and that'll take you to the spot where you can download the lesson plans and the data sets. I'm going to wrap things up here. Just a couple of things if you want to stay connected to us. Again, that's our website, facingthefuture.org. Some of you already are on this list, it looks like, but we send out a newsletter electronically once every 2 months. One just came out, so you can go and download the old one of that from our website, or you can sign up for a new one as well. Another opportunity is our Peer Educator program. I'll just briefly tell you about that. It's an opportunity for you to share what you're doing or how you're using Facing the Future lessons and global issues in your classroom with other teachers by going to conferences and presenting a workshop about it. We are able to underwrite some of your costs for going to that conference, and you can learn more about that on our website as well. We're going to send you a survey probably about the next 6 months, and we really encourage you to fill that out because it's through that survey that we created this math book. As people asked for it, we got kind of a resounding call that we need this resource, and so we created Real World Math. And lastly, again, that's my email address, dave@facingthefuture.org. And for those of you who are here today, I will be sending you a copy of the slides, and you'll also get a link to the archived copy of the webinar itself, so it'll be a video that you can watch stream on the web, and that should be up by the end of the week, hopefully. So thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a good afternoon and evening, and look forward to hopefully hearing from you again. Have a good afternoon.